In my talk. So if you're expecting SEO wonderfulness, it's not going to be in this one. You probably aren't going to make much money after hearing my talk, and there's probably going to be swearing. Actually, there will be swearing, because I know what I'm like and I can't help it. I apologise. I did this talk a while ago. It's a very personal talk. Kelvin asked me to do it again. He'd seen it online, but hopefully no one else has seen it online, because I hate that when I've seen the talk online and they do the same talk. But I'm going to do it again. Just a little bit, I run a company called Mudlark. We are a small studio, a production company. We make games and we make digital projects. We made a game called Chrome Roma that uses your Oyster card in London, enables you to play London. And we've done some work with the Royal Shakespeare Company. We were the first people to put a performance on Twitter with real actors. Anyway, that's work. I was brought up, does anyone know what that is? Or that was? Oh, that's a shame. I was brought up in Portsmouth. That's the Tricorn. It was the Tricorn Centre. It's a shopping centre. It was a shopping centre. It had elevated walkways. It had areas, it had a market that was a bit like that bit in Blade Runner where the ostrich walks past and you get to the snake eyes, but it was better than that. That was the way you got to the car park. So when we drove up in my dad's crapped out Beetle up there, you go in a spiral up to the car park. That was where a nightclub was, on the top floor of a fucking nightclub. If we were really lucky, we went to Southampton, because Southampton had a John Lewis. And John Lewis was something my mum really aspired to go and spend time with. This is the Windham Court. Windham Court was a housing complex built in the late 60s. It was designed around a shipping liner, like Cunard and stuff. So it was a whole complex where people lived that was based on a ship. I thought that was quite interesting. And if we're really fucking lucky, we went to London. And in London they had buildings with had intercontinental business machines written on the side of the buildings. And I thought that was amazing. But I also saw things like that. And as a sort of 12-year-old trying to skate really, really badly, these guys were amazing. And they were using buildings in ways that I'd never seen people use buildings. They were using buildings like a playground. They were physically understanding how these buildings worked. They weren't white clean. They didn't have awful facades on them. They were bits of environment that they felt they could live in. When we got this is a gatefold album by Yes. This was done by Roger Dean. My parents were hippies. I was thinking this morning, I came through an Instagram picture of Infinity Foods, and I forgot how much I love Infinity Foods. And if anyone hasn't been to Infinity Foods, it's like a whole food shop just down the road. But they used to have bins, cardboard bins with muesli in. And we used to drive all the way over to Brighton when my mum used to scoop out muesli for our school lunches, our school breakfast. And we had hippie parents. Most of our bookshelves are covered in pictures by Chris Voss. Chris Voss used to create spaceships in environments that, as a child, and I was kind of given these things to read and forced to learn through science fiction, but these were amazing. These were nothing like I used to see on television. And then I kind of got into computer games, and I got into computer games very heavily. This is a game by Roger Dean. This was a game called Shadow the Beast that I think was a Mega Drive game. But the games themselves enabled me to augment my imagination. They meant to allow my imagination to go into places that most of the school books didn't enable me to do. But then, does anyone remember this book? You can still find it on eBay. It's an Usborne book of the Future Cities. They did 3 of them. They did Robotics, Future City, and another one which I can't remember. But that was where we were meant to live. But the weird thing is that we do have all that. They've got a massive widescreen telly. They got the aspect ratio wrong. It's not portrait, it's landscape. But we've got that. He's holding in something which is kind of like an iPhone. Telephone has TV on already. Well, most people I watch on the train coming down were watching Mad Men on a phone. We haven't quite got the robots serving drinks. I think that's the only thing. But we've got a kind of shopping thing there. You know, it's there. Then there's a guy called Sid Mead. Sid Mead he designed Tron, and he did lots of other bits, and this was how we were going to drive around, and we're kind of nearly there. And there was other thing that was really, really important to me. James Bond. James Bond, yes, he was a spy, yes, he did all these things, but he was the epitome of somebody who lived in the future. He drove a fucking car that went underwater. That was good. He had a watch you could text him on. So people would text him messages, and they would come up on his watch. I don't know if you can see this, but he also had a watch that he could look at boobs on. He's not going to save the world with that, but, he also had watches you could fax people on, blow things up, and he had a fucking jetpack. Like, how many of you, we want jetpacks, and we still don't have enough jetpacks. Now, someone making games that I'm still aspiring to make this game. This, if anyone hasn't seen it, is a two-player game with a full three-dimensional hologram in the middle. That's good. The second thing is about world domination. That's good. And the last thing was that if you lose, you get hurt. It had electric shocks in it. Legally, I'm struggling to get this through, but it will happen. Now, the other thing that combines all this is that James Bond used to go to amazing places. Used to go to bases, used to end up in people's bases where there used to be guys who had obviously spent millions. They generated millions of pounds to build these places. They had thousands and thousands of contractors working out how to build underground bases. These were wonderful places that enabled you to have a spaceship underground where no one else would know, and James Bond actually went to live in them. And not only were they underground, this is in space. This is Moonraker. Somebody built a base on the moon that no one on Earth could see. That was, this was, and it's not just like, in the 70s and stuff. This is still building amazing buildings. I think the last James Bond one, and all of these buildings, they epitomise the future. But there's one really, really big problem with all this. Every time the finale of the film, every time that, I'm getting really excited about these locations, these environments that I live in, they all end up like that. Every single one of them, James Bond puts something down, runs away, It blows the fuckers up. It's like James Bond makes a decision that these things are wrong. He's blowing up the future. And I couldn't really... So as I grew up, I tried to work out why this was. That's Ian Fleming. Ian Fleming wrote the books that the films were made of later, and Ian Fleming had a real problem with modernism. He had a real problem with the future. He would prefer that we all live in kind of mock Tudor suburbs somewhere, cul-de-sacs that don't enable anyone to think independently. He wanted to get us living in a rural England that never really moved on from about 1930. So much so that that's Eno Goldfinger. He was an architect. He was a really, really good architect. He understood that the future and everything that we can do, the only reason we're not getting there is our own laziness. And he built the Trellick Tower. This is in West London. It's just about still standing up for somebody who prefers facades and mock England is going to rip it down. But that's the Trellick Tower, and it's a wonderful place with views across the whole of West London. So what did Ian Fleming do with Eno Goldfinger? He turned him into that. Like, if I hate anyone enough, I'm going to make a film and turn them into a fat American sweaty gambling type. It's the most biggest insult you can think, and this is a guy insulting an architect. And it's not just Ian Fleming. Other people that I really, really respect as businessmen and people with big visions. There are huge organisations that need to be put in place to build structures to give people jobs, to change the universe for better. What do? Blow the fuckers up again. Yes, there's a little kind of exhaust port that you can get in there, but this is not just about. So, from what I learned from my childhood and Hollywood and books, is that if you are excited about the future and you're excited about modernism, then you're a baddie. But they just wanted to make a better place. They just want to design something. So I kind of, when I originally put this talk together, I thought this is funny and interesting, but really I should be doing something that's related to working somehow. So I talked to a few of my colleagues, and William Gibson, who, if you don't know or haven't read, he's a sci-fi writer of the late 90s, and he's slowly writing more about the present. And if you haven't read any of his books and you're involved somehow in advertising or marketing, read his books. They are the most amazing business guides about the future that you'll ever read, and they're fiction, so they're not constrained by him trying to sell a conference circuit. But what he started to do is the future is getting smaller for him. Russell Davies is a planner, an advertising agency, is a really good friend of mine, and he's been talking about this as well. And he's been talking about the science fiction writers aren't writing science fiction anymore. They're writing about now because it's easier. You don't get called up for being an idiot because you predicted something that wasn't going to happen, like jetpacks. And it's making me really, really angry. I went on Wikipedia, and if anything's on Wikipedia, then it's true. There is a mundane science fiction group. Now, this is true. You can Google it, you can look on Wikipedia. This is a bunch of authors who are saying, these are the rules about science fiction. We're never going to get to space. We're never going to go on Mars. There's never going to be robots. Let's fucking ignore that and do it. This is really angry. Really, really angry. And it's not just science fiction. This is a film about a social network. On that social network, there are people making games about being on a farm. No, it's worse than that, they're making iPhone apps about a farm that exists on a social network. And that's really annoying me. That's not building the Death Star. That's like looking about how much money can you make out of that person because they're too stupid to think any bigger. And that made me really, really angry. And so I sort of trying to kind of express this and develop this in kind of some of the work that we're doing. And I showed this to one of my colleagues in the studio and said, look, I want to do this talk. It's about me being angry, and I don't know if it's pointless. Is it just me being angry? Is everyone just going to say, yeah, good, thanks, bye? And he said, your talk is about a horse. And I said, what? And he said, your talk's about a tiny horse in the Apple Store. So, okay, good, go on then. That's interesting. He said, Google it and find out a bit more about it. So I did. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read a bit from somebody else's blog. It's a designer called Frank Shamiro, who lives in Portland, and he's an amazing designer, and he really understands the human condition. And he wrote this blog post, and I realised that this thing is what I've been trying to say. And he went into the Apple Store, and this is completely true. He went to the Apple Store in New York, and he went there to purchase something. I think we'll find out a bit more. And he went there and he saw a horse. He saw a tiny horse that was actually in the Apple Store. And he says it was a beautiful pony with flowing mane, the likes of which his sister would have killed to give for Christmas if she'd been 7 or 8. But no one was looking at the horse. No one could see the horse. So an employee comes over to him and asks him about his laptop. And he asks the difference between a 15-inch and a 17-inch, and he asks if he can get a matte screen because he doesn't like the shininess. And he's just about to ask about the RAM, and he says, my fucking God, I can see a tiny horse. And the employee says, yeah, he's in here all the time. So he says, really? What do you mean he's in all the time? And he says, he's there for that guy. That guy's blind and he has a horse. He has a sightseeing horse. That's fine. Move on. I'll tell you about Matt Screen. And Frank says, the thing is that exceptional like this that nobody sees anymore. Conversely, it is an exceptional thing that everyone notices, but quickly we grow acclimatized despite the brilliance of it. Cell phones and the ability to make a phone call to anyone in the world, that's a tiny pony. The instant gratification provided by being able to have almost any question answered immediately, that's a tiny pony. A black president whose father is from Kenya and the mother is from Kansas and is actually the president, that's a fucking tiny pony. So when does this magic of any situation fade? When do we get acclimatized to the exceptional? Is this how we're going to get by these days? Is it just how we get by and survive and remain sane? Is this how we define a pattern, no matter how exceptional, and acclimatise to it? Now, I read that, and I understand that, but I don't want to accept it. And we shouldn't. We should see the tiny ponies for what they are, and we should try and find more tiny ponies. So hopefully that's been useful, and thank you very much.
Has anyone got any particular questions to ask Toby on that front?
Come on then.
Okay.
Thank you for a lovely presentation. I want to say that I'm very glad that both you and Roger Warner have decided to go beyond the traditional code area, techie, etc. Very briefly, I think that we will always need thinkers behind what we do. And the fact that you mentioned that the future is always destroyed by the baddies, I think it should be done by us, by ourselves. I'd like to know what your thoughts are over this. There is a world pre-Google and post-Google, and thousands of people gather every year to talk about this thing, SEO. And then apparently content is king. I think that content is dead, actually, and maybe us, in order to create a better future, should actually try to destroy Google itself. Data is king. Content is dead. Long live content.
But content is data. The problem is that, not the problem, okay, I've been making things for over 20 years, and you know, there were some people mentioned Alta Vista earlier that I remember, and autonomy. I remember everyone in Cambridge getting very excited. There was a dog, I think, involved somehow. I remember some of the pre-Google stuff, and I remember I used to literally have a file of all the websites that I ever needed. That was the internet for me. It was a list, and if anyone said, "What's the internet?" I could give them this list, and it kind of Yahoo, other bits. And it's not a pre-Google, post-Google. It's that people are starting to really understand digital, in that television programs are going to become software. And I don't mean digital, I don't mean ones and zeros, because they already are. But at the moment, that television is a piece of content that you download, and it's sort of wrapped around a sort of social thing, and it's sort of got some e-commerce attached to it, and all this other stuff, that it doesn't really get it. When I can pirate, when I can download a copy of a file that comes down and has all the social connections in it already, and it has all of the connections to my social stuff, and that's when it's going to be interesting. All content is data, and to think, originally I used to think the internet was about publishing documents, then it was about shopping, now it's kind of social, and before long it's going to be everything. I think that the really important thing to think is that what a lot of today, and it's really interesting listening to a lot of you guys, is that this is like an arms fair, and it's like an algorithmic arms fair convention, and a lot of you guys are trying to think about the next thing. Okay, well, the first talk was about goddamn Google making the internet better for people. And I apologise that I did get the gist of what the guy was trying to say, but there was a kind of, my website got downgraded because they didn't think it's good enough, fuck them. Well, obviously, you know, you're going to hate them for doing that, but make the website better. And it's always going to happen, and it's going to keep happening, and it's your job to keep being faster than whoever is the dominant player, whether it's Google or someone else. And that's really exciting. That's what's exciting me about today, is that there's a desire of people of trying to find the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and it's going to come from tiny little companies out the back of Woking or somewhere that goes, hey, look, there's this thing that Google doesn't know about yet. Google then kill it, and then they'll move on to the next one. But that's what's exciting. That wasn't even the answer to your question, was it? But no, I don't think we should destroy Google. I think Google is you can't destroy Google. Google is the internet at times, but there'll be another one.
Any other questions? Well, if we could give Toby a round of applause.